You've seen me take a product apart to show you how it physically might be made. You've actually got to use your brain to work out how that might be made. You can see that I haven't drawn the pieces of studding on here, but I've explained how it would be. You've also got to picture it in your head and decide how big it's going to be. If you're going to make this for a child, you've got to think about the width of the shoulders. So this might be no more than maybe 200 mil. Even that's quite big for a baby. So I might think about that being 200 mil in that direction. I might think about it being 100 mil in that direction. And because it's square, this is also going to be 200 mil in that direction. If you get a ruler and just look at it, it will give you an idea of the size. So if you take a ruler and you go, you know what, my hand is that big, I want it to fit in a hand, or a child's hand is that big, and you'll get an idea of size if you don't understand. So we can start by putting these sizes onto this shape. So this would be 200 and this would be 200. The same for the base. The sides are inset a little bit, so they're not going to be 200, they're going to be something like 20 in from each end. So that makes them 200 minus 20 is 160 long. And again, if I want that to be about 100 mil high, that's probably going to be either 80 or 100. We'll keep the maths simple. You've then got to think about the materials it's going to be made from. It could be cut from acrylic, a bit like this bright green piece with a laser cut shape that can accurately be reproduced. Even the holes for the screws will be cut by the laser cutter at the same time. The difficulty is sometimes joining plastic either to plastic or to other materials. Here you can see it's been screwed on in order to be able to make it fit, but these screws aren't exactly child friendly. The product you saw me take apart has been dyed a red colour, and if you look carefully at the end grain you can see it's made from plywood. Plywood's quite a good choice, but it can be quite heavy and you may end up with splinters. At this stage it doesn't really matter what materials you're making it from, but you need to state which one it is. So I'm going to make this from plywood. I'm going to decide that I'm going to make this from 6mm plywood. The sides are also going to be 6mm plywood. So already I've dictated some materials. I can change them later. These parts that we're going to buy in, we don't always need to give materials for, because they will obviously come in the materials that they're sold as. So we now have an idea as to how it would be made. I need to think about some of the production processes. The slots for the side have been made with a machine called a router, but if you look carefully at the way the design is made, they overlap at one end, but the other end overlaps the same way. That allows each side to be the same, so we're reducing the number of components we need. We could have a long and a short and a short, but that would mean you'd have two different components. Instead, to make this box, we have 4 identical components, and then just the one component is modified into the door to allow it to slide. This is the router, and the tool piece in the middle is the bit that's made to cut the material. So the router sits on the machine a little bit like this. It's obviously lined up properly, but then the router is moved along and back to create the groove. Similarly, the hole is drilled with a drilling machine. All these processes are things that you would have done in the lower years at school and will build from your experience of what you've done. So cutting using a Hegner saw, a machine to cut the plywood out, would be something you've done in the lower school years and you now need to remember and incorporate within your Key Stage 4 work. So now you need to add your experience to your designs here. So these may well be cut with Hegner saw. That maybe one job. The slots will be machined, slots with router. And the third thing is to make the holes, and the holes will be drilled and cut out with the Hegner. So we've got some manufacturing processes to make that shape. You need to go through each one and decide how it would be cut out. You perhaps need to think about a finish. So on the product that you've seen, it could be painted, it could be varnished, it could be dyed a colour. On the example that we're using here, these have been coloured with dye. So coloured dye finish. The reason we've used a coloured dye finish is to make it attractive, bright colours for children. So we can put that down. So you're trying to get as much detail as possible onto this outline design so that you could almost go and make something of it. However, you're probably not going to make this design. It's just a concept that you've shown could be made. The last step is to think about the sizes and the parts list. For a parts list, you usually need a number of rows. So you can draw a very simple parts list using some lines and a ruler. And on the left-hand end, you put the name of the part. So I've got a top. I usually need to know how many I need of them, the quantity. So I've only got one top. And then I need to know the length, the width, and the thickness of the material. So in my case, it is 200 by 200 by 6mm ply. So I'm going to put 200 by 200 by 6. And then the last thing we need to put on the end is the material, which is going to be plywood. And then you might even have another column where you could add the finish or any special notes, but we're going to stop there. Sometimes as you complete your parts list, you might realise that the top and the base are actually both the same size, so you could alter that to 2. Likewise, the sides, I need 3 there, but I need another one there. So I need a total of 4. Each one is 160 long, it's 100 high, and it's also made from 6mm, and they're also made from plywood. This is where your note can include the fact that you're going to round one of them. And then the last thing is the doorstop that you're going to glue onto the side, like this here. So the doorstop is quite thin, so we're going to only have one of those. It's going to be plywood again. It's going to be this time maybe 3mm plywood, and if the door is 100 wide, it doesn't want to be as tall, so we're going to make that 80 and maybe 2 centimetres or 20mm wide. So that's how we work out our size. You now have a sheet which shows you everything you really need to know about that design. It's got the concept, it's got some production design ideas, it's even got some sizes, and in theory you could give that to anybody and they could go and make a prototype to see whether or not that idea would work. You're welcome then to develop the shape or to change the layout or to make it taller or smaller or fatter and to create another set of concept designs and perhaps only model 2 or 3 concepts out of a design choice of maybe 5 or 6 concepts. So you may well draw 6 or 7 of these, but only make or develop 2 of these or 3 of these, and then perhaps only model 1 or 2. It's important that you have some 2D drawing, some 3D drawing, some sizes that develop into the sheet here. You have some methods of production and some plywood and some materials, as well as your extra fittings that you need. Your fittings here should be mentioned on the side here. So you can count up the number of nuts you need, the number of dome nuts you need, and the length of studding, and you'd add that at the bottom. But they're the bits that you would need to buy in from a shop, whereas these are the bits that you would ask somebody to cut out, or you would cut out of a blank sheet of material. There you have a concept design that is now a little bit more product and design engineered, ready for manufacture.